Awkward. No, I'm just playing. Welcome, welcome. Hello, beautiful souls. Welcome to tonight's Becoming Supernatural live. You can't hardly see my face, can you? Let me bring this hat back a little bit. When I go outside and I'm walking, if you see my content, I'm always trying to protect myself from the sun because it is vicious, y'all. It's so hot that I've actually ruined some beautiful plants that I bought from my home with the direct heat from the sun. I had no clue, but I'll share about that later. Anyways, I'm glad you're here. If you're new here, I am Brittany Starks. I am your manifesting mentor. I'm not a coach, I'm not a guru, but I'm a woman who does what? I demonstrate. And I help others to do the same through this work by practicing it daily and helping them navigate. So I've been walking through Dr. Joe Dispenza's work alongside you. It's why I decided to read this book for a third time and in chapter 6, we are going over case studies, living examples of truth. And we start chapter 6 with two different stories of healing and transformation. Tonight, we're talking about Ginny and Daniel, two powerful stories of how that basically show us what happens when you stop identifying with your past and you start emotionally aligning with your future. And this is a very big subject for me because so many of us unconsciously continue to live by the emotions of the past, whether it's through telling the same old stories and justifying our emotional pain, or just not understanding that our bodies have its own memory. And so when we find ourselves in states of trigger, we're not realizing it, but we're also living from the past just by reacting in the same old ways. And that takes a lot of energy from us, our creative energy, and the energy that our bodies need to actually do what they can do, which is heal. As Dr. Joe teaches, our bodies is one of the greatest pharmaceuticals on the face of the planet when we give it the right instructions and internal environment to do so. So, if that sounds good to you, you are in the right place. We're going to kick things off with part one, which is Jenny's story of chronic back and leg pain. And some of my takeaways, hopefully, you've watched part one of chapter 6. That's always the assumption. But if not, you can always go back in my playlist, which is on my YouTube channel, the only playlist available. You can go back and at your own leisure go through all the videos. They are categorized in order and includes all of my past lives. But we're going to go over part one, and I usually take notes, review those notes, and then we go from there. So, first things first, Jenny lived in chronic pain for years, right? He introduces this woman who she had chronic back pain from a car accident, and she also felt sharp pains in her legs as a result of that accident. You can hear some of the emotional turmoil that she went through as you review that chapter. But he said that she was in this pain for so many years until she decided to change her internal state first. Heavy on the first, because many of us think that the conditions out there have to change in order for us to feel better within. And Jenny, from doing this work, and I think he explains that she had been doing this work for a while, and then this happened. This car accident happened. So she was already a student. She already knew what was possible, but she started doing this work. The accident happened. The chronic pain began. She stopped doing the work, and that was another thing. She had to make a decision to get back to the work. And it was only when she decided to change her internal state that things started to change. So he says her healing didn't start with the treatment. It started when she changed, number one, her identity. She went from someone who was always hurting emotionally to someone who believed in healing as a lived experience, meaning something that she could feel tangibly within herself now. And because I think because she had already been doing the work, she was a lot more open to the practice of getting there. But if you listen to the chapter, you'll understand it wasn't an easy process for her. She had to overcome herself over and over and over again. And I totally can identify with that as someone who's been doing this work for a while. It really hit home for me this week, and I actually want to share a personal reflection. I've had some moments, quiet ones, where I felt discouraged about something that I've been manifesting. And there were moments where old parts of me wanted to panic. And as if I'm honest, I did panic. I wanted to react, and in my own ways I reacted. And I wanted to try to help the universe make it happen faster, right? When you get into impulsive actions of wanting to do something, wanting to send an email, wanting to send a text message, or reach out to people, or take some kind of action in the direction of the thing. I wanted to do all the things because I felt like I could possibly help the universe bring it faster. I'm looking at my watch, I'm looking at the time that's passing by. And yes, I'm growing, but I'm human, right? And I could feel my body slipping into that old emotional pattern of control and fear because that's exactly what I was slipping back into. The old me wanted to have some sort of control or hand in making things happen. And that has been my default for a very long time. And it wasn't until I started doing this work that I unearthed that, hey, this is the pattern that you can now let go of. And here's how. And so the more I sat with this chapter, the more I remembered nothing I've ever forced has ever felt aligned. And that goes for relationships, that goes for opportunities, that goes for connections with people. If I ever tried to force it, it never went the way I intended it to, or I always ended up disappointed. So I paused and I let the emotion move through me. And that has been my practice lately. I think we forget that we do the meditations not just to be like Tibetan monks. We don't do the meditations just to appear holy. We do the meditations so that we can grow more aware in our waking day. So that means you're doing the meditation not for the sake of just sitting there and getting your awareness and attention on the energy centers and blessing them. That's all great. But the real true gift in doing the meditations is catching yourself during your day-to-day practices. So you will be able to be aware when you're slipping into old patterns. And I was able to catch myself. And when I did, I paused, I let the emotion move through me, and I gently returned to the state that I've been practicing, which is wholeness. Because in essence, when you feel whole, you don't feel the need to force, control, or manipulate. When you feel whole, you know that there's nothing more that you need to do other than to believe and just be. When you feel whole, you're not living by the memories of the past. You're too enthralled in the possibilities, the potential that exists right before you. So, this is the real work, not controlling outcomes, but learning how to surrender without slipping into despair. And that's why a lot of my content has centered on desperation, because when you are acting from a desperate place, you're literally signaling to the universe, I don't feel whole. I don't feel whole, because if you felt whole, you'd be desperate for nothing. You'd need nothing. You'd enjoy things, yes. You'd be grateful, yes, but you wouldn't need it to feel whole. So Jenny's story reminded me that your healing, your breakthrough, your alignment, it starts in the signal, not in the symptom. So the minute she changed her identity from being a victim of everything that had happened to her, remember, she was justified. She's been doing this work, still ended up getting into a car accident that left her with chronic pain. So yeah, she was angry. But she understood that if I continue to be the angry victim, I get to have the life that belongs to her. And it wasn't until she changed that within the signal changed, and then her healing could become possible. She ultimately did heal. So someone asked a question, how did Jenny shift her identity if her pain was still real? She stopped waiting for physical proof. She stopped waiting to feel better. Instead, she practiced the emotion of someone who was already healing or someone who was already healed, even if her body hadn't caught up yet. I think there was a part where they mentioned that she was trying to meditate, but the pain was so deep, like so intense, that it was hard for her to sit in meditation because of her back pain. If you could imagine having a back injury, you're sitting in meditation with your, spine straight and your legs crossed, or even if you're sitting up straight in a chair, That could be very painful, but she mustered through some of those moments. And what she noticed was that more and more the pain became less and less. And so for her, that was many wins. Like she celebrated those moments. That's what kept her going because she understood that incremental pain free moments continue to grow if I continue to do this work. And that's how she changed her signal. Like with every meditation she did, she was able to sit there longer for longer periods of time, basically. And as we get into the next story with Daniel, you'll see that there was a similar thing with him as well. Hope that answered your question. So, question number two, someone asked, what if you're practicing the work, but the pain or symptoms keep coming back? Patience. It doesn't mean you're failing. It's if you think about it, Dr. Joe says by the time we're 35 years old, we have already conditioned ourselves to a set way of being. And if you have some chronic emotions that you go to that send your nervous system into dysfunction or dysregulation, then that means you're just going to have to spend more time reconditioning your body to a new mind, literally. And so it means your body is still remembering your past, it's still remembering past emotions, it's still remembering past stories. And you know what? Your body does this really funny thing because it remembers the past so well, it braces you in a very unconscious way for impact. It braces you for what you think is around the corner. So if you think disappointment is around the corner, you kind of emotionally brace yourself for that disappointment. If you think something that you should be afraid of is around the corner, you unconsciously brace yourself for that fear. And you start getting ahead of it with the emotion of fear. You start getting ahead of it with the emotion of anxiety or anxiousness. And so I would say stay gentle, be patient, keep practicing the elevated emotions. The field doesn't need you to be perfect. This isn't a perfect process. This work, I'm gonna tell you, this work will test your gangster, okay? It will test you because the minute you grow aware, you no longer get a pass in life. You have to now do something about what you've been doing. And so the field doesn't need you to be perfect. It just responds to your consistency and to your coherence. So if you stay consistent, stay on it, stay doing the work. It's not about being perfect. Don't worry about if you skip a day or you miss a meditation. Just get back on it when you're conscious of it. But the more you practice, repetition is how we learn. It's how we got this way. And so it's going to be how we overcome ourselves. It's going to be how we teach ourselves something new. And it's literally the way that we exist as humans through repetition. Hope that helps as well. Did any of you online have any questions or any insights from chapter 6, part 1, Jenny's story? That was really eye opening for me. Like I said, my personal reflection was I'm human. Like I've been doing this work. The reason I started these readings is because I know the difficulties that I face when I'm doing this work. And I know that community matters. You're going to have tough days. There's going to be days where you don't believe. There's going to be days where you feel some doubt. There's going to be days where you're frustrated and you might be angry with the process because you feel like, why hasn't it happened yet? Like, what is going on? Is this even working? I've been there, guys. I'm not a guru, and that's why I say I'm not a coach or a guru because I feel like a lot of people are trying to coach people up from a space of having not overcome very difficult parts of themselves. And so, if you haven't reached those depths of yourself, it's kind of hard to pull people out of their own patterns if you don't even know what that looks like. So that's why I never really identified as being like a coach. I like to see myself as like a mentor because if I could do it, you could do it, and I'm only sharing what I've worked myself through. I don't share what I'm not privy to. So I hope that helps. But in essence, we will move on to part 2, which was Daniel's story. And this was interesting because I never knew what he dealt with was actually a thing. Electromagnetic hypersensitivity. I was like, what? What? But Daniel, his nervous system was overwhelmed by even the smallest electromagnetic exposure, like cell phones, devices, computers, which is ironic because he had a career working around computers at one point in his life. So he was this crazy, successful Israeli guy who built a bunch of businesses. and then lost it all because he developed this hypersensitivity to Wi-Fi, tech, and light, which is interesting. But his healing came when he chose to stop identifying as someone who was fragile. But if you know the story, you know it took him a while to get there because, again, he lost everything because he had this super hypersensitivity to everything electromagnetic. He basically moved in with his mom. He said he lived in a tiny bedroom and would spend most of the day curled up in a ball because he was in so much pain all the time that he would cry, you know. And he said that he didn't want to live anymore, and his friends and family were concerned, as they should have been. But his healing came when he chose to stop identifying as someone who's fragile. But again, he was justifiably fragile, right? But we don't need to continue to argue for our limitations, and that's not what he allowed himself to do. Somehow, some way, and you'll see it in that part where he came across Dr. Joe's work, started doing the work, started beginning to recondition his body to feel empowered, and lo and behold, he went from isolation to full on interaction because he trained his body to expect safety instead of threat. And so he was able to get to that point. If you remember his story, he was able to get to that point because he literally exposed himself to the very thing that his body was reacting from. He did, so I think he rented out an office at one point, and he decided to meditate in a place where there was Wi-Fi and computers all around him. And that must have been intense, but he mustered through it, even the parts that felt painful, until his body started to feel safe in those environments again. And Dr. Joe explains that he eventually healed from that hypersensitivity. And now he's making way more money than he did and working way less than he did before because he came from that hustle culture, which is kind of what led to his condition. He was always working, beating his body up, and he found himself in a space where he needed to pay attention to his body because it started to shut down on him. And I always tell people, we got to remember that our bodies are our best friend. We got to stop disregarding our bodies as if it's just a machine that could be treated any kind of way, exposed to anything, that we can eat whatever we want, put whatever junk inside of it, and never face any kind of consequences from it because it's not true. And I always heard my mentors and my loved ones who are older than me say that, once you hit 40, it's downhill from there. I think I'm starting to understand that, but I'm understanding it now from an esoteric quantum space of knowing that, like, we are literally stewards of this vessel that allows us to enjoy the tangibles of life, that allows us to enjoy things through our five senses. But if this vessel is not well, guess what? We don't get to enjoy life as much or as in depth as we could. And so this work with Joe is beyond physical manifestations. It's literally embodiment of really being fully in your life, being fully who you came here to be. Trusting that you are already whole, that you're already complete, that you don't need to prove your way into worthiness. I actually did a post this week about worthiness and how so many of us, especially those who grew up religious, were taught that we were born unworthy and that we have to get saved or redeemed or baptized or forgiven into our worthiness. And having to recondition your body from that dogma and understand that you're worthy because you exist. Because why would the divine bring you into this plane of all the combinations of spirits that could incarnate? Yours came at this time. You don't think that that's enough to say that you're worthy, that the divine thought that you should exist? I think, when you think about it, it's like, well, duh. Like, how did I let anybody else convince me otherwise? And I will tell you, programming, propaganda, religious dogma has done a number on this planet. And I would say, the truth by the way it feels at your core, because I think we're all one at the core. But one of the things that I wanted to point out from Daniel's story is that it reminded me of how easy it is to let our past experiences define our present behavior. And as I reflected on earlier, I actually had a moment today, if I'm honest, with work. because I still hold down a 9 to 5. Shout out to my 9 to 5 for being my first investor. But I was triggered by one of my coworkers that I've worked with for a while. And in the moment, I felt my heartbeat started to pick up. And I felt myself getting angry from this conversation because I was agitated. And it's been a pattern for as long as I've been working with this person. And I had to check myself because my mom always told me this saying that you can go from place to place, but everywhere you go, you take yourself with you. So in essence, I knew, and at my core, I knew that it's not about this person that I work with and how I'm triggered by them. It's why I'm even triggered to begin with. Why does what this person do or how they show up trigger me so deeply? And that's what I need to deal with. Because if I don't change that pattern, I could go from place to place, but I'm taking that pattern with me, which means I could end up encountering same exact person, just a different body. You know what I mean? Like same dynamic, different body, different person. So even when we're manifesting new timelines, the body sometimes still clings to what's familiar, even when it hurts. So for me, I've been manifesting some newness, but I noticed that even in my environment right now, I still find myself triggered by things. And so, yeah, I'm manifesting what I know is divinely mine, but it doesn't mean I don't still react to what's in my current environment. So the only way out of that loop isn't more thinking, it's feeling differently on purpose. So I had to change the way I started feeling about this person, even though I've been practicing feeling a certain way for a while. And I know that it has nothing to do with the person. You know, if you understand the works of Neville Goddard, Law of Assumption, he teaches that everything is you pushed out. Everything is one great big mirror. So it wasn't about my coworker triggering me. It's about this tick that I have, this assumption that I have that when I see it in action, it annoys me. And so I have to get to the core of that to change that because that does not need or get to control how I exist. Like it's like giving my power away to a pattern. So that's what I've been doing lately. I've been telling my body, we are safe now. We don't have to act like the old version of us. It's okay to receive this new life that we're calling in, even in the face of something that looks familiar. So even though I haven't received the full manifestation, I know that this work is the foundation for me. I've seen the changes that I've had over the years of doing this work. I trust what it's done for other people that I know. And even I always recommend the stories of transformation on Dr. Joe Dispenza's YouTube channel. That is pure gold because he talks about it like all you need is one glimmer of possibility to know, number one, it's possible. But then the work becomes not only do I know it's possible, but now I got to get my body on board to believe what? To believe that it's possible for me, right? Because that old story will creep up and you'll start knowing, yeah, I know it's possible. I've seen people do it. I know people can heal. I know people can manifest things. But every time I'm triggered by the things in my environment that remind me of what I don't like, I start to question, is it really possible for me? Because this has been around for a long time and it just feels like it's taking forever. So one of the things that lets me know I'm on the right track is when I feel emotional wholeness. I believe that that is the real sign that the manifestation is on its way. When you can feel whole, regardless of what you're being faced with, when you can feel whole, regardless of the news you might have received 5 minutes ago, when you can bring yourself into feeling your wholeness in the present moment, regardless of the facts, that's when you know things are shifting. Why? Because if we are electromagnetic beings and the signals that we're sending out is what's drawing things to us in the form of manifestations, then when I change my signal from within, the universe has to respond. The quantum has to respond. That is the law. That is the law. Neville teaches that through law of assumption. When I change my assumption, aka the things that I think, the emotional reactions that go with those thoughts, when I change my assumptions, the outer world conforms. So that's the work we're actually doing. And that's how I feel like we really know that things are shifting, even when we don't have evidence. So shout out to Daniel, shout out to Ginny. Both had amazing stories of transformation. Someone asked for um, Daniel's story. How do I stay in elevated emotions when my nervous system is still reacting to my environment? Whew, I explained my own experience with that. It's very normal, but I would say start with short moments, like the moment I had today when I caught myself right in the middle of a reaction. So you're not trying to bypass your nervous system. Okay. A lot of people think you have to not feel the feeling and suppress or try to, avoid the emotion. I let myself be angry. I let myself be agitated. It was validated. I was very much validated in my agitation and my anger. But I took a deep breath and I said, okay, I'm going to release that. I don't need to feel this way. And that's not going to be conducive to me getting whatever I need to get done anyway. And it's also me being the old self, which I'm retraining my body. So I need to recognize that I'm not trying to bypass, I'm not trying to shortcut my nervous system. I'm just retraining it. Okay. So use your breath, use the blessings of the energy center meditations or heart coherence. When you breathe into the heart center, and what you do is you'll be teaching your body to ease into safety, to feel safe in this moment. So once I let the feeling of anger, frustration subside, I took a deep breath, like I said, boy, that breath is very healing. We don't give it enough credit for just how transformative it is, aside from the fact that we can't live on this planet if we don't breathe. But the breath will bring you so much calm and healing and safety. And then from that moment of just being present with it, starting with a short moment, you want to stretch that window over time. So maybe you go from doing a 5 minute breath work or meditation to 10 minutes. And then once you get 10 minutes, under your belt, you can do 30 minutes or 45 minutes. I've gotten myself up to about 2 hours of meditation if I really carve out the time to do it. And I've heard in Dr. Joe's workshops that people sit in 4 hour meditations. And I know it sounds insane, but you would be amazed at what you can stretch yourself to do. And people have such transformative experiences because when you're in long meditations, you're in alpha states, which means you're still conscious, you're not asleep, you're still aware, but the body is like so relaxed. You'd be amazed at what happens. And I think that's why a lot of people have their healings at these workshops. But yeah, you're going to be triggered by your environment. It happens. Just start with small increments and use your tools. They are there for you. Next question, someone says, is it normal to feel like your environment is testing you more when you start this work? Heck yeah. Yes. I feel like, you know what? I'm gonna be honest. So it's not that your environment is testing you more. I think what happens is when you start meditating, you start becoming more conscious and aware of your moment to moment. And again, that's the whole point of meditation. It's not to just be a monk in a cave and be a Buddhist or anything that where you just sit and meditate all day. You're doing it so that when you're in your everyday life with the people you love, the people you don't love, circumstances you love, circumstances you don't love, your environment is the echo of your past self. So it just feels like it's testing you more, but it's not testing you more. You're just more aware and you're more aware of who you used to be, which is great. It's gold. It's an opportunity. When you are triggered, when your stuff comes to the surface and you're aware that you're doing the thing you don't want to do, that is gold because now you're not a victim to your life anymore. You can make a different choice. And the more consistent you are in that new signal of choosing to be in coherence instead of being incoherent, the more you choose to be regulated versus dysregulation in your nervous system, the more the outer reality will start to shift. So it's about consistency. Don't give up when it gets loud. That's more of an opportunity that's in your face. It's raging and in your face, and it seems louder and it seems harder because you're no longer unconscious to it. You're no longer unconscious to it. You get in an argument with the person you used to arguing with, it seems like a super blowout session since you've been doing the work, but it's not any more large than it used to be. You have more consciousness around it. You know you don't want to do it anymore. You know that's not who you're choosing to be anymore, but your body doesn't. So all you're doing is being a good steward and saying, you know what, body, we're going to take ourselves out of the familiar and get into this practice, and we're going to continue to condition ourselves to a new reality because we deserve it. So don't give up. It means that whatever you had going on is clearing out. And I hope that helps. So, chapter 6 started with some really cool stories. And in the next part 3 and 4, I'm going to upload those. I believe tomorrow morning they're scheduled for. So you'll be able to get into those. And that will wrap up chapter 6. And then on Friday, I'll go live and we'll talk about the next 2 stories of transformation. So these stories are not just testimonials, they are reflections. And as I said, I've had my own personal reflections for both. Ginny and Daniel didn't heal because they were lucky. They healed because they chose to feel worthy before the proof showed up. And that's your invitation too. This week, I challenge you to practice that feeling. What would it feel like to belong to your miracle, whatever that may be, to be worthy of your vision? What would it feel like? Even if your 3D hasn't caught up yet, return to your wholeness. The field will reorganize everything for you there. And so will your future. Everything will conform to the frequency that you are consistently choosing to emit, regardless of the circumstances, regardless of the facts. And I also want to encourage you, there was a testimonial that Dr. Joe published today on his YouTube channel with this wonderful man who I think he healed prostate cancer. And he did it in such an unconventional way. Go check out his YouTube channel, The Story of Transformation. He healed prostate cancer. It's a wonderful story. It's also a wonderful reflection for some of what we talked about in tonight's live. But if there are no other questions, if you guys don't have any other reflections to add, let me just see, because it's been quiet tonight. I'm wondering, I haven't seen anybody write in the chat, but if you guys have no other questions or no other comments to add, I want to continue to keep you encouraged. As I said, I'm on this journey. This is my 3rd time reading the book, but I'm so glad I'm doing it in this format because it gives me an opportunity to always go back to it when I want to. Other people are reaching out to me. They're so grateful for me sharing about this book. Number one, for some people, it's their first time. Others have reached out and said that this is their 4th and 5th time, but they still appreciate my format, my reflections, the lives. And I'm so glad to be doing this with other light hearts, beautiful souls, people who want transformation, not just for themselves, but for the world, because you're going to find that this work goes beyond personal transformation. Because when you change, everything changes. And Michael Jackson said it, if you want to make the world a better place, take a look at yourself and make the change. And this is what we're doing. So just know your personal transformation is your contribution to making the world a better place. And I commend you for it. I'm proud of you. I'm proud of me. And until next time, check out parts 3 and 4 being uploaded tomorrow morning. Be ready for Friday's live. And I will see you guys in my next live and over on TikTok and over here on YouTube in my shorts. Till next time, thanks for being here. Bye, guys.